Simon, perhaps before we get to what's happening in Australia and South Africa specifically, I'd like your thoughts on the change in political leadership here in South Africa. You were pretty vocal of what the previous administration was doing to the economy and doing to profits for companies like Woolworths. What do you make of the change that has happened since then?
We're very excited. I think South Africa is entering what could be a new era, and that's exciting for business, exciting for the country, and it's exciting for all of us. In particular, we are seeing the end, I think, of state capture. We're seeing the end of rampant corruption. We encourage the President to continue his efforts in this direction. The great loss of money to the fiscus, of jobs to the economy, and of confidence for South Africa now has a chance to turn. So there's a lot of work to do, a long road to travel, but God, by golly, are we in a different situation to what we were 3-4 months ago.
For sure, and as the country is trying to nip state capture in the bud, there is another form of corruption that is emerging, particularly from the private sector, since the fallout or the Steinhoff debacle, to be specific. My question to you, Simon, is about the role of a board in overseeing some of, things that shouldn't be happening in the company. What extent should the role of the board be in policing some of the maladministration at company level?
So this goes to the root of what is a board for. And a board is an absolutely critical part of the layers of governance. The board's role is to oversee the strategy, to appoint the CEO, and then, in my personal view, to ensure that the values of the organization are adhered to. And without those values, we don't have anything. And the board is the primary backstop for the community, for the investors, for the shareholders, for the customers, even for our suppliers, to hold that ground and apply the values of the business. The board needs to be probing. It needs to understand the business in which it's operating. It needs to understand the management, and it needs to be able to challenge the management in a free and unfettered manner. It's an absolutely critical part of the balance of power and of the governance structure of the business.
And of course, now we also have our auditing industry that is in some form of a crisis. I mean, as a board member of a global company like Woolworths, to what extent is the shortcomings of our auditing fraternity currently being perceived in the rest of the world?
Well, this is not good, number one. But number two, my own experience of the audit profession is the vast majority of people in that profession are honest, are diligent, are challenging. Certainly in the businesses that I've been involved with, the auditors are challenging. They do surface issues which need to be looked at. And I think we should be very careful about tarring the whole industry with the same brush. Clearly, there are one or two people who have not stuck to their own values, have not stuck to their principles. But the vast majority of the audit profession, particularly in South Africa, is deeply values-based, is very diligent in their work, and is a good source of reliance for businesses and for shareholders and customers to be able to rely on.
Mm-hmm. And just lastly, as a personal question there, to what extent do you see the rise of online shopping being a disruptor to brick and mortar retailers like yourselves? I do know that there has been some caution or pessimism from some of your shareholders as to why Woolworths is spending, billions of rands investing in brick and mortar establishments in Australia and South Africa as well, when you've got, major disruption coming from online. For you, how are you seeing a better way to strike the balance between the two?
I think you've got to look first at the customer. So the customer is increasingly moving between online and the real store. And I think that's where the future is going to go. You're always going to need beautiful stores with beautiful products, showing off your merchandise, showing off what you stand for, what your brand stands for. And you are increasingly going to have people sitting at their offices, sitting at home, browsing online and seeing what they can find online. And the job of all retailers is to mix those two. So in our businesses in Australia, we've got one or two of them, well over 20% of sales now online. In South Africa, the number's still much lower, but the growth rates are high. So we're actually quite excited about it, but it does not mean that we shouldn't have beautiful stores. And it's the beautiful stores with beautiful goods that are forever going to drive the brand image and brand reputation of a business. What I do find fascinating is how many of the online players are now starting to put up bricks and mortar stores. And we've just seen in the United States, Amazon has bought Whole Foods, the wonderful food business, for $13.7 billion, in my view, to get that tangible experience and the very special feel that only a Whole Foods store and their brilliant stores can bring. You can't get that easily online. So Amazon's going to learn a different way of retailing food out of Whole Foods as much as the food industry is learning out of Amazon. So I see a forever mix of the two, online, bricks and mortars, and a magic experience in both.